Welcome to Fatal Files. Today, we have another episode of Karens who demanded managers and got karma instead. From a vegetarian Karen who got punched over a wrong order to another who tried taking home an entire seafood buffet only to leave with far less than she expected. It was November 23, 2019. The lunch rush had already filled the downtown business district in Portland, Oregon. Office workers lined up inside a popular build-your-own-salad restaurant while delivery drivers squeezed through the entrance every few minutes. Outside, a light drizzle had left the concrete steps leading to the sidewalk damp. 47-year-old Leah Holland had been a vegetarian for nearly 20 years. She worked as a freelance graphic designer and often grabbed lunch between client meetings. Friends described her as deeply committed to her diet, especially when it comes to counting calories. And in instances when restaurants got an order wrong or served her the incorrect order, she's also known to lose her temper. She's a very busy person, so answering work messages no matter where she was, even while placing orders, has become her habit. That afternoon, her phone rang as she reached the register. While replying to a client about an overdue project, the cashier finished building her salad and asked if she wanted to add grilled chicken. Without looking up from her phone, Leah absent-mindedly agreed to the chicken add-on before tapping her card and moving aside. A few minutes later, her name was called, but the moment she lifted the lid, she froze. Pieces of grilled chicken covered the top of the salad. Leah immediately marched back to the counter, demanding to know why meat had been placed in her order. The cashier calmly apologized and explained that the receipt showed grilled chicken had been added during checkout. Leah insisted she never would have ordered it and accused the restaurant of changing the receipt after she paid. "I think we've all made mistakes while distracted. The difference is whether we admit them or decide everyone else must be lying." The shift manager came over and offered to remake the salad free of charge. Leah refused. Instead, she accused the staff of insulting her beliefs and trying to cover up their mistake. Customers stopped eating and turned toward the counter as her voice echoed across the dining room. Then she slammed her tray onto the counter. The plastic bowl burst open, sending lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, and dressing across the register and onto the floor. Before anyone could react, Leah grabbed her large cup of freshly poured coffee and threw it directly into the cashier's face and upper body. The cashier screamed as the hot liquid splashed across her cheeks, neck, and uniform. A kitchen shift lead named Mark Roldan, 32, rushed from behind the food line after hearing the scream. He ordered Leah to stop and step between her and the injured cashier. Instead, Leah grabbed the ruined salad and hurled it into Mark's chest. Dressing and chicken scattered across his apron. She still held the empty coffee cup and suddenly raised it above her shoulder while stepping toward him. Believing another strike was coming, Mark threw one quick defensive punch. His fist struck Leah across the left side of her face. She stumbled backward several feet before catching herself against a nearby table. Several customers immediately called emergency services while others helped the burned cashier into the kitchen so employees could begin flushing her face with cool running water. The restaurant manager again asked Leah to remain inside until police and paramedics arrived. She refused, cursed at the staff, and stormed toward the front exit. Sometimes the worst decision isn't the first one. It's refusing to slow down after everything has already gone wrong. As she pushed through the door, witnesses saw her wobble while descending the damp concrete steps. Investigators later believed the punch had left her dazed. She missed the final step, slipped forward, and struck the side of her head against the sharp edge of a concrete planter before collapsing onto the sidewalk. Paramedics arrived later and rushed her to the hospital. Doctors found severe bleeding around her brain caused by the impact with the planter. Despite emergency surgery, Leah died the following morning. Police reviewed surveillance video from inside and outside the restaurant. Witness statements matched the footage, and prosecutors ruled Mark's single punch was lawful self-defense during an active assault. The restaurant later installed additional cameras near the entrance and expanded de-escalation training for employees after the attack. One defensive punch wasn't what ended Leah's life. It was everything she chose to do after it. The next woman also demanded the manager, and she ignored every chance to walk away. It was October 18, 2013. Every chair inside a busy nail salon in Plano, Texas, was occupied as Saturday appointments filled the afternoon. Customers waited while technicians finished one appointment after another. 49-year-old Valerie Monroe had become known among friends for bringing Pinterest photos into every salon she visited. She expected every detail to match perfectly, from the color shade down to the smallest glitter pattern. If it didn't, she'd argue until someone gave her a discount. I understand that she wanted them to match with the photo, but nail art is handmade, and expecting an exact duplicate just isn't realistic. That afternoon, Valerie arrived carrying several screenshots of an elaborate chrome floral nail design covered with tiny hand-painted details and raised gel accents. Her nail technician immediately explained that the design could be recreated closely but not perfectly. The salon used different gel brands than the original artist, and some decorative pieces shown in the photo were unavailable. Throughout the 2-hour appointment, the nail technician repeatedly stopped to show Valerie each color, charm, and finish before applying it. Surveillance cameras later confirmed Valerie nodded each time and approved every step. The argument started only after the final top coat was cured. Valerie stared at her hands for several seconds before her expression changed. She insisted the flowers were slightly larger than the Pinterest photo and claimed the chrome finish reflected too much light. The nail technician calmly reminded her they had discussed those differences before starting and pointed to the sample materials Valerie had already approved. However, Valerie did not take it positively and refused to pay. She accused the salon of bait-and-switch tactics and demanded the manager immediately. The manager reviewed the appointment, the design reference, and the security footage showing Valerie approving each stage of the work. After confirming the salon had followed the agreed design, he even offered a partial discount if she wanted the nails removed and redone another day. But Valerie still refused. Instead, she swept several bottles of nail polish off the reception counter and grabbed the payment terminal, threatening to walk out unless someone admitted they had ruined her nails. The salon owner calmly stepped in front of the entrance and told her she was free to dispute the charge with her credit card company, but she could not leave with the payment terminal. Valerie turned toward the door anyway. As she yanked the terminal away, its coiled security cable stretched tight. She gave it another hard pull, but the cable snapped the machine backward out of her hands. The sudden jerk threw her off balance. She instinctively reached for the nearest rolling stool to steady herself, but her freshly finished extra-long stiletto acrylic nails made it difficult to get a secure grip on the narrow metal frame. The stool rolled away across the polished tile before she could steady herself. It sounds almost impossible, but extra-long acrylic nails change the way you grip almost everything. Your fingertips can't fully wrap around objects, and even a simple attempt to catch yourself becomes much harder. Valerie lurched sideways into a rolling manicure cart loaded with bottles of acetone, UV lamps, and metal tools. The cart rolled away instead of stopping her fall. She reached for the armrest of a nearby salon chair, but her fingers slipped before she could get a firm grip. She fell backward, striking the back of her head against the cast iron base of the salon chair. Employees and customers rushed over while someone called 911. She was still breathing when paramedics took her to the hospital, where doctors found a fractured skull base and severe bleeding around her brain. Surgeons operated immediately, but she never regained consciousness and died the following morning. After reviewing the recording and witnesses' testimonies, investigators concluded the incident was an accident that unfolded during the confrontation, and no criminal charges were filed. In the months that followed, the salon introduced written approval forms for complex nail art. The owner also redesigned the workstations, replacing stools with enclosed frames and moving payment equipment farther from the customer area. It's strange to think that the very nails Valerie had argued over for 2 hours also made it harder for her to catch herself when she needed it most. The next woman walked into a thrift store convinced a few dollars mattered more than the crowded aisle standing right in front of her. It was November 7th, 2022. The nonprofit thrift store in Cedar Rapids had taken in weeks of holiday donations, leaving heavy display racks crowded around the checkout area. A narrow metal transition strip ran across the floor between the seasonal displays. Among the regulars who came for those donations was Rosalind Faye Kettleman, 55. She had left a bookkeeping job 7 years earlier and now ran a resale shop out of her garage, buying secondhand clothing across eastern Iowa and reselling it online. It paid enough to matter. Employees knew her well. She visited several times a week and often argued over prices, insisting donated items should be cheaper because they were free anyway. She regularly asked managers for discounts, questioned pricing decisions, and complained whenever another customer picked up something she wanted first. Staff considered her demanding, but she always stayed just inside the line where banning her would be difficult. I think that's how a lot of these situations start. Nobody expects constant complaining to become something much worse. That Monday afternoon, she found a vintage motorcycle jacket, real leather, worth several $100s online. It had been set out by mistake with a temporary holding tag, meaning management had not finished pricing it. Staff were not allowed to sell items with holding tags, and after shopping there nearly every week for 7 years, Rosalind knew exactly what that tag meant. At that point, this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. Later, investigators reviewing security footage saw her compare several jackets before quietly removing the holding tag from the leather jacket and replacing it with the cheaper price tag from another coat. She looked around twice before walking toward the register as though nothing had happened. The cashier scanned the tag, but the computer immediately flagged the item. Within seconds, the store manager apologized for the confusion. He explained that the jacket had accidentally been placed on the sales floor before pricing was finished and removed it from the counter. Rosalind immediately demanded he honor the lower price because the mistake belonged to the store. When the manager politely refused, she accused the employees of changing the rules after seeing how valuable the jacket was. According to the incident report, she caused a commotion inside the store. She insisted customers were being scammed. The manager began filling out an incident report and asked her several times to step away from the checkout area. Instead, Rosalind walked behind the register, snatched the jacket off the counter, and announced that she was taking it because the store had already made the deal. The store manager stepped sideways to block the exit without touching her, but Rosalind tried squeezing past him while clutching the jacket. As she backed into the sales floor, her heel caught the leg of a rolling garment rack loaded with more than 70 heavy winter coats. She instinctively grabbed the top crossbar with both hands to steady herself, which only made things worse. The overloaded rack rolled backward until one wheel slammed into the raised metal transition strip between the tile and carpet. The wheels stopped instantly, but the weight stacked across the top kept moving. The entire rack pitched forward. It struck Rosalind across the shoulders and knocked her flat onto the floor before crashing into a cast-iron boot display. The display toppled into a heavy handbag fixture, which then slammed into another iron stand filled with woven baskets. Employees pulled away the collapsed displays and found Rosalind trapped underneath. She was awake, but said she could not move her legs and was struggling to breathe. She reached the hospital awake, but deteriorated during emergency surgery. Doctors found multiple crushed ribs, a shattered pelvis, severe damage to her lungs, and a torn section of her aorta, the body's largest artery. Surgeons fought to control the internal bleeding, but the injuries were simply too extensive. Rosalind died in the operating room later that evening. Investigators concluded the incident was a tragic accident. Security footage showed the store manager had only been trying to stop unpaid merchandise from leaving the store and never used unnecessary force. Prosecutors found no evidence of criminal wrongdoing and closed the case without charges. Afterward, the thrift chain changed how seasonal merchandise was displayed, requiring heavier racks to be anchored or spaced farther apart during busy shopping periods. Rosalind's daughter eventually closed the online resale business her mother had spent years building. What happened to Rosalind was already heartbreaking. The next case's argument also ended in tragedy, but this time, an ordinary checkout lane became the last place anyone expected to lose a life. 3 stories down, and we've still got 2 to go. But before we get into them, if you're enjoying the video, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. Trust me, the last 2 are the hardest to shake. It was December 21st, 2018. 4 days before Christmas, a busy grocery store on Cincinnati's west side was packed with last-minute shoppers. Every checkout lane was open, and the conveyor belts ran almost non-stop. Beneath each belt was a narrow opening in the metal housing. Bernadette Joy Kessling, 48, processed warranty claims from home for an appliance distributor. According to her sister, the job had changed how she saw everyday life. She constantly looked for rules she believed other people were breaking. I think we've all met someone like that. After a while, they stop looking for problems to solve and start looking for people to correct. Bernadette also filmed what she called consumer violations, posting videos about businesses or customers she believed had crossed a line. The videos attracted little attention, but they convinced her she was doing the public a service. That's the dangerous part. If every argument feels like content, prevent. Eventually, the argument becomes the goal. That evening, she wore a loose cardigan with wide bell sleeves and carried a heavy handbag on a long crossbody strap. At lane 7, a 22-year-old shopper had balanced her phone against a nearby drink cooler to film a grocery challenge for friends, guessing the total before the cashier scanned the items. According to witnesses, Bernadette immediately assumed the shopper was secretly recording nearby customers without permission. She stepped between the camera and the register, announcing that filming inside the store was probably illegal. The shopper played back the recording to show it was aimed only at her groceries. 2 nearby customers even said they didn't mind appearing in the background. Bernadette still refused to move and insisted a rule had been violated. Instead of letting the cashier finish the transaction, Bernadette brought the entire checkout lane to a standstill. Bernadette turned her shopping cart sideways across the lane, stopping the transaction, then began recording the cashier while demanding a manager. An assistant manager arrived within minutes. After reviewing the shopper's recording and confirming nothing improper had occurred, he calmly asked Bernadette to continue shopping or leave the store, and that might offend her because instead of walking away, she demanded his employee number, the store's filming policy, and the regional office's direct phone number. When he offered the customer service number, she insisted the lane remain closed until the general manager arrived. Ignoring repeated requests to step back, Bernadette walked around the manager and reached across the checkout counter. She grabbed the shopper's phone and declared she was keeping it as evidence until police arrived. The manager immediately told her to return it. The shopper reached for the phone at the same time, but Bernadette twisted away, holding it above the moving conveyor so nobody could take it back. Everyone's attention shifted to the argument. Nobody noticed how close her sleeve had drifted to the moving belt. The loose fabric brushed the narrow opening beneath the conveyor housing. At first, Bernadette didn't even realize anything had happened. When she stepped backward, she felt a sudden tug instead of moving freely. The cashier immediately pressed the emergency stop button, but the conveyor continued moving briefly as designed. Within moments, the sleeve tightened around the concealed drive roller beneath the belt. The moving fabric pulled Bernadette forward against the checkout counter. As she struggled to pull away, her crossbody handbag shifted behind her shoulder, causing the strap to tighten across the side of her neck. She clawed at the strap for several seconds, but it continued tightening as she fought to free herself. Employees heard her gasping before she gradually stopped responding and slumped against the counter. Employees immediately shut off power to the lane and tried cutting away the loose clothing to relieve the pressure. The fabric had already become wrapped inside the conveyor mechanism. Firefighters partially dismantled the checkout lane to free her before she was rushed to the hospital. Bernadette never regained consciousness. Doctors later determined that the pressure on her airway and the major blood vessels in her neck had caused a severe lack of oxygen to her brain. She died 2 days later. Investigators matched surveillance footage with the checkout system's maintenance records and found the conveyor had stopped exactly as designed after the emergency button was pressed. The investigation concluded the incident was a tragic accident and no criminal charges were filed. The store later enclosed the exposed opening beneath its checkout conveyors and added emergency stop controls that could be reached from either side of every register. Bernadette's sister quietly removed her consumer complaint videos from social media. The shopper later deleted the grocery challenge recording and declined every interview. It's hard to imagine a holiday shopping trip ending this way. An argument that started over a phone lasted only a few minutes, but the consequences stayed with everyone who witnessed it long after Christmas had passed. Now, the woman in the final story wasn't trying to expose a stranger. She simply refused to leave behind food she believed she had already paid for. It was September 14th, 2021. A buffet inside a busy Plano shopping center was packed for the dinner rush. Kitchen staff constantly crossed the customer walkway, carrying heavy stock pots from the service corridor to the buffet. The tile floor had been mopped less than an hour earlier. Deborah Ann Straith, 50, had spent most of her adult life raising 3 children. Even after they had moved out, she still cooked more food than anyone could finish and hated seeing leftovers thrown away. Friends joked that nobody ever left her house without taking a container home. Honestly, you just couldn't leave her place empty-handed. She had paid for the entire birthday dinner. During the drive over, her nephew later remembered Deborah joking that everyone should eat their money's worth and take leftovers home because she was paying for all of it. Taking food home was the problem. When the party finished, she asked a server to box the untouched prime rib and shrimp still sitting on serving plates. The server explained that once buffet food had been sitting at a customer's table, the restaurant could not package it because it was no longer considered safe under health rules. The restaurant had actually been cited over the policy 2 years earlier. It sounds unreasonable until you realize those rules exist, because the restaurant has no way of knowing what happened to that food once it left the buffet. She insisted she had paid for every plate and demanded an exception. The dining room manager explained that buffet food could not legally be packaged after sitting at a customer's table and offered dessert vouchers instead. Deborah refused, accused the restaurant of cheating customers, then pulled out her phone and began recording. Within minutes, nearby diners had stopped eating to watch. At that point, what should have been a 2-minute disagreement had become everyone's business. Deborah refused to return to her table. Instead, she followed the manager as he tried to end the conversation, repeatedly stepping in front of him so he could not walk away. 2 relatives quietly asked her to let it go, but she ignored them. Without realizing it, she had stopped directly beside the service corridor door, only a few feet from where kitchen staff constantly carried heavy trays and stock pots between the kitchen and the buffet. And for me, that's a terrible place to stand inside a busy restaurant. The manager tried ending the confrontation by turning back toward the host stand. Deborah immediately stepped sideways to block his path, refusing to let him leave. As he moved to go around her, she instinctively backed up to stay in front of him. Focused entirely on the argument, she never looked behind her. Those few backward steps placed her directly in front of the service corridor door just as a kitchen worker pushed it open from the other side. A kitchen employee chose that exact moment to leave the corridor carrying a stock pot holding nearly 8 gallons of freshly prepared soup for the buffet line, weighing close to 65 pounds. The solid service door swung outward with its usual force. Deborah, standing directly in front of it, was struck squarely across the shoulder. Startled, she stumbled sideways into the employee's path. He tried to keep the heavy pot balanced while avoiding her, but the sudden collision shifted its weight beyond his grip. I don't think people realize how impossible it is to stop 65 pounds that's already tipping forward. The stock pot pitched forward. The boiling soup soaked into her clothing, trapping heat against her skin. Staff cut away as much fabric as they safely could before firefighters treated the burns and rushed her to a regional burn center. Over the next week, surgeons removed damaged tissue and placed skin grafts, but burns covering nearly 1/3 of her body left her vulnerable to infection. A severe bloodstream infection developed, and she died when her organs shut down. Security cameras showed the employee following normal procedure as he carried soup from the kitchen. Investigators determined he had only seconds to react after Deborah stepped into the service doorway, and the incident was ruled an accidental workplace collision. No charges were filed. The restaurant later rerouted hot food through a staff-only corridor and added a viewing window to the service door. Deborah's family began celebrating birthdays at home instead, saying they never wanted another family dinner to end that way.